what tools we're given in painting to be able to help enforce what you're wanting to do with your practice. So again, I called it Beyond Representation, because I was just talking about how representation in any art form, you're representing the thing that's put there in front of you. But with art in any kind of context, painting, photography, sculpture, we can actually go beyond what is just there. And that just really, being able to have the permission and also the tools to go beyond that, you can actually start to create a unique practice, something that's your own. So I'm just going through just a few different methods that you can use to be able to push your own practice and create something that's unique. Yeah, so we've just talked about just a few things that are involved in it. So obviously one is colour. The representation of colour, if you're representing, say, a landscape, you'll be just using the colours that are given you there. But in paint, there are no rules or restrictions. You can use whatever you want. So when you're talking about an emotion or context that you're wanting to put in the painting, you can actually, you've got license to be able to use the whole colour palette range. So it's almost asking yourself, why am I putting that colour there? You know, why am I choosing this colour? What is that going to do? And again, it's a lot about playing. You know, yes. I used to go to the extreme to see what a colour would do. You know, putting one colour down, monochromatic colour, all pink or something. You know, how harsh is that? But then, what do you do when you introduce another colour alongside that? Again, we're given it to us. You know, you see colours everywhere you go. So you know, you can pick up those little kind of visual stimulus and go, oh, I like that colour. Oh, I like that colour. But when you're coming to create your work, you're almost you know, you can introduce and invent your own colour combinations that aren't necessarily realistic or true to whatever it is that you're trying to paint, but you're using it in a way to tell a story. So I'm talking about these methods as linguistic quality. You know, you're painting as a language, and you get to create your own language of what you're doing. So colour was one, texture is the other, that's what we've got on to, so I've brought you up now. Again, texture is something that's given to us everywhere, but with paint, and again you've got it with sculpture and anything else, you've got a whole tool set of texture. You can paint thin, you can paint thick and heavy, you can do both. It's the same with colour. It's like what happens when you paint something really thin and then you put just a small patch that's extremely textured next to it. That says something, you know. Again, I've come from quite a representational background. I used to paint things fine art and paint it as it is, but it would be, you know, you got that whole flat surface always. So when I started to introduce texture, I could see that there was movement, there was something else going on, there was a behaviour in the paint that didn't exist in the world, that it would make the painting alive and active. And so I started to use that as a language. You know, how is that movement, what is it saying in the work, you know? So the figure's not stagnant anymore, it's got a bit of life to it. You're starting to look, you know, it makes your eye travel around because there's a thin patch and then you get attracted to the thick patch and you go backwards and forwards. So it makes the painting become active. And then the next one is composition. And again, this is the one we're going to go to in drawing later. But composition is a big one. It's again, in a representation way, we're given the composition to us. We're painting still life that's sit on the table, we're painting a landscape outside, we're painting a portrait in front of us. And again, the portrait perhaps in the landscape, if you did it representationally, everything would be the right size, or, you know, as you would see it, the figure would be in relation to the landscape, you know, the landscape in the background would perhaps be small, the figure would stand out a bit bigger, or however it is. Same with the still life on the table, you know, you'd have the table a particular size, the still life would be a particular size, and it would be in the middle of your piece of paper. But again, when I'm talking about no rules, painting, art, drawing, you have the license to extend those boundaries. Extend and also just break them. You know, there is no boundaries, there's no limits. So when I'm talking about composition, when you're trying to invent your artwork, you can actually use the composition as a way to push what it is you're wanting to say. So when I say that, say if we've got say we've got the figure in the landscape, but you're wanting the landscape to really, you know, envelop the figure. You're wanting it to kind of intrude, or you're wanting it to be more about the relationship with the figure and what's going on. I mean, that's what I paint a lot. So what I tend to do is go, well, I want the landscape to be extremely blown up. I want to just take the one that you've got in front of you. It's a very close-up of a bit of water, actually, a bit of marsh. I call that one out of the mire. So obviously the figure's kind of coming out of that miry, murky water. Yeah. But if it was in relation to the water, she would obviously be swimming, or be a bit different, you know, and the water would be, you'd see, you know, that she was actually sitting in it. So it's more, I'm painting the idea of what I'm wanting to come out of it. And again, when I'm talking about colour, I exaggerated the colour of what was going on there. It's, you know, out of the mire, I want it to be more murky, or, you know, so I made the green a bit more khaki, or, you know, so I'm just pushing and pulling those elements to extend the narrative in the work. Again, if you're given a still life in front of you, yes, you could paint it perfectly in the middle of your piece of paper, or you could do an extreme close-up of something and that comes off the side. You could paint a bit of the background and that's on this side here. You don't actually have to put it all in the same context with each other. You can manipulate it and move it around just to see what behaviour it's going to have. What is that going to say? And so that's what you're always asking yourself when you're using these methods and processes. Why would I change that? Why would I make something bigger and something smaller? Why would I make something one colour and something the other colour? What is that going to do? So for me, it's a lot of trial and error. You basically play around with it. Like I said, there's no ABC. There's not, you know, it's not, this is going to do this and this is going to do that. Some things you can do, know that by seeing other painters and other artworks. You see, oh, well, that colour does that because of that reason. So you're giving yourself an equation by what you're seeing. But a lot of it is about doing it yourself. And that's where you develop a unique quality. You know, when you actually find something yourself, it's a good way to copy someone else to see how it does in your own work. Copy a texture, copy a colour. But when you start to go, oh, but I want to make that orange a bit more redder, what is that going to do? Then you're coming up with your own equation because you're answering your own question. You're going, oh, that does that, and I like what that says. So you leave it, and then you've got your own unique answer. So yeah, basically, this is, as you can tell, it's a fun thing. You know?
Yeah, no rules.
Yeah, exactly. You know,
Yeah.
It's great when this little room, you know, the rules are out there,
Yeah.
and you're going to go home to your rules because you probably have washing to do, or you know, some sort of task you have to complete. But in painting, you don't have that. You know, you can actually stop it and let it be unresolved and come back to it later. You know, it doesn't have a 9 to 5 clock off. You actually can kind of come back to it and keep talking about it. And when we get to I'll talk about that when we get to the drawing. So those are colour, texture and composition. Some of just the basic elements that you can use to manipulate, to start inventing, start being, again, just posing those questions to yourself and playing around and coming up with your own answers and resolutions to start creating either emotion or narrative or anything. It could just be a thought or, you know, in your work. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about next is some artists. I mean, there's so many artists I love, so I was just trying to think of the best ones to use for today. I thought I'd get one landscape artist and one figurative artist. Landscape artist is from Australia, where he was actually in New Zealand as well, but he's in Australia now. His work is mainly there, and New Zealand figurative artist, so I've got a bit of both. And they both appropriate these methods. And I mean, if you're familiar with some famous artists, Matisse, Picasso, you'll know that it's not your normal representational artists. They do different things and they have extreme qualities about them, and they've got their own particular way of working. They've come to their own resolutions.
Playing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, you know, just look around at artists and start to see these, you know, question those things and see what it is they're doing. But I thought for today, these two artists would be quite good. So I think we'll start off with William Robinson. So in terms of landscape, I wanted to read a quote of his. So one of his quotes is, "My painting is about explaining things to myself." So he, that's what he wants to do. Basically, he just hibernated himself in Australian landscape, and he was a bit of a hermit, which is fine, but he just wanted to paint the existence of the landscape around him, but not the representation of it, but the idea of it. He's explaining things to himself. He wanted to paint the feeling of what it was like to just be completely in that landscape, to be completely confined in that environment. For him it was freeing. That's why he made himself, live in that area. I will read the beginning bit out. Just I wasn't going to, but I think it's quite poetic. Living in the country, everything moves. The seasons, the clouds, nothing is set. There are things behind you, all around you, and are in it, and you are in it. Everything is constantly moving. You begin to realise that you are in a landscape that is really the crust of the earth, the air and ground. We're all just spinning through space, and you'll see it when I show you some of the works. They're very spinning, It's like he actually creates that environment. There is something about the painting that is indefinite, not solid. We don't really have an orientation in this infinity. You begin to question what time is. Time is something that is just measured on a clock. Time can also be a mind thing. You can be a time traveller with your mind in a painting. So it's just, so I'll just go to some of his bigger landscape works. They're massive. He's one, he does do some figures as well. I don't really want to show you. Again, I'll pass these books around, so these are quite good, so you can have a look through. Some more? Oh, go for it, that's fine. So this landscape here, you don't even know where the beginning is. You don't know where the ground starts.
Sort of got like a Salvador Dali type thing to it, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
And the sky's here, where you think that is actually the water. That's where the water is, and then the tree. So everything is manipulated. And once I pass the book around, you see as well the textures that he uses. That's quite Van Gogh. It's got all the brush marks, which helps enforce that movement. Nothing's stagnant. Everything has movement about it. So when you hear those quotes from him, or what it is he's talking about when he's in these landscapes, you see it in his work. So he's obviously painted a lot to come to this point, but he's never painted what is there in front of him. He's probably just got these beautiful landscapes around him. A lot of them are dry, but he's painting what's, what it is for him there. So he's got a lot of green, he's got a lot of lush.
And the movement is in the painting.
Absolutely, yeah. So there's some other, he does some really big, this is another big one. And colour, again, he's using colour that will help trigger what it is he's thinking about that place and time. And the funny thing is, this is the same environment, but every image is different. So it's almost like he's travelling the world painting, but it's not. He's just, the next day will be different from the day before. The landscape might look the same, but his emotions or his connection to that landscape is different every day. So he's painting what it is, what the landscape means to him. Which is why I just thought it would be, it's just valuable talking about these different methods that you can use for your own practice. Because you can push it beyond what just exists then and there to what you're wanting it to be, what it means to you. Whatever it is, even if it's just a simple portrait, you've got colour in play, you've got texture in play, and you've got composition in play to go, what does that portrait mean to me? Who is that person that I'm painting? Even if it is, your grandfather or your daughter or whatever it is, it's what does that mean to me? What colour is best going to represent how I feel about that? What texture is going to best bring it to life? And what composition can I use to create that story that I'm trying to talk about? So I'm just going to pass this one around. So some people with cameras, so I'll pass it down this way. And while I pass it around, I'll talk about the other artist. I'll let you have a look at this. See how we go to one of this stuff. Good. So the next artist is a figurative artist, Jeffrey Harris. And I'll read a quote from him. They've both got great quotes. It's always good hearing from the artist itself, you know, about the work. So his quote is, "I'm painting the paintings I can't see out there." I'm painting the paintings I can't see out there. That gets me going because that's where I came to, I suppose, in my own practice. I really fought with wanting to paint what I couldn't see, you know, out there, with having to paint what's there. Again, I needed to go through those processes to build up those skill sets. You know, painting what is there. You're, you know, learning what a figure looks like or what a landscape looks like. But that, you know, the integrity really just wasn't there. I wanted to move it beyond to something I couldn't see, and I wanted to create out of what I'd learned something imaginative, some, you know, the narratives that I had going on in my head. I wanted to be able to find a way to paint that and not just what was in front of me.
So what was that quote again? Sorry.
That's fine. I'm painting the paintings I can't see out there.
Right, yes, thank you.
No worries. That's later.
And who was that?
This is Jeffrey Harris.
I know the one, oh, sorry.
Oh, the
yeah.
one before?
No, the one that you just quoted.
The one I just quoted was Jeffrey Harris.
Right, yes.
Did you want the one before as well?
No, that's all right.
Okay, so hopefully you can see this from there. Can everyone see that kind of light? Yeah. So for these particular paintings here, he does a lot of different types of works. I thought this one would be quite good because in the colour composition and texture, he's got all this going on in here. So basically he's got a lot of spaces that are just lined, so it's like drawing, it's just empty, very thin. And then he's got, like, he chose to paint the face and it's very soft and fine. And then he's got all this textural work down here. So even though it's quite busy, it gives a good example of putting different textures, shapes, colours next to each other and manipulating the composition as well. So he's got everything going on at the same time, what I'm talking about, and just complicates the whole thing. But he's doing it in a way to really push the narrative of what he's talking about. So he uses a lot of biblical references or mythological as well. But he didn't want to do it in a literal way. You know, you've got your Renaissance art that just shows the actual scene as it is. And again, a lot of mythological art as well, that it shows the actual story played out in a very traditional way, or how it would have been told. Well, he wanted to paint the idea of those stories, or the idea of those scenes. It's quite intense work here. So what he's doing is he's implementing those kind of stories that he's wanting to say in here, but he's using all those painting methods to tell the story. Instead of actually going, okay, well, I'm going to put someone on a crucifix and I'm just going to paint it as it, you know, as it realistically is. He's saying, I want to have the idea of that, but I don't want it to be literal, as in I don't want everyone just to say, oh, okay, that's a painting of a crucifix, but I want to have that kind of thought there, or that feeling there. So he's using colour to counteract, to make it stand out, or, you know, jump out at you. And these ones are fantastic. And again, you know, a face says a lot when you paint a face, but he's chosen to block out the faces. So it's almost like you're wanting to see an emotion, but you can't see it there. So you're having to imagine the emotion that's there. So it's almost like using those tools in a way as a tease, you know. You can play around with certain things and leave it there and ask yourself what it is that you're being able to read out of it. Again, the best way to do it is to look at another artist's work. Again, just by making you look at this, instantly it's like, well, where are the people? They're standing there, but they're not there, you know, because you can't read the emotion. So then you're answering that question, by blocking out the actual face and facial expression, I can't really, you know, I have to invent my own story of the behaviour of the two figures with each other. So that's another way of bringing it to life, or narrating the image yourself without having to be so literal. You're using the composition, you're using the colour, and you're using texture to tell the story itself. So I'm going to pass this book around, and then we're going to do a practice. Here's the one. When I talked about size, you know, you get to play with your own size. You get to choose what is where on the canvas. The relationships of the figures, this figure here to those figures there, and this one that stands out here, none of them are actually in proportionate size to each other, but it's making a statement, you know. You read heavily what this figure is, and you're wanting to know what that figure is, and there's obviously a little bit of playing going on in the background. So it just, all it's doing is inventing more of a narrative, more of a scope of what the figures are actually able to say, than if you perhaps just painted everything in relation to each other. It extends the boundaries of what the painting can actually do. So I'll pass this around, and when I get this one back, I'll talk to you about what we're going to do practically. It's a little exercise. Thank you. You can wait.
Do you have a particular view that you would be?
No, there's some of the bigger ones. Yes, I was talking about taking it beyond the usual representation of, you know, and using colour, texture and composition to make it do something else. So obviously having a circular landscape going around. His main thing was he wanted to create movement and the emotion of the place that he was in. And obviously what horses was he had. And also he was there. I was in Australia. So yeah. Cool. Yes. And that's the other thing as well, she picked up, I mean, it says it's a self-portrait. He does a lot of self-portraits, and a lot of artists do. But the funny thing with self-portrait is you can either paint your portrait, or you can paint the idea of yourself in something, which means the figure can actually be anything, you know, even if you're inventing it, making it up. But it's you in there. That's a good way to start telling a story, because you know all about you. So how can you use colour, composition, or you know those methods to talk about you in that work, your relation to whatever it is that's going on in there. So what we're going to, I'll wait till the book comes around. So take your time, it's fine. What we're going to do is we're going to do a quick drawing exercise. So it doesn't have the colour element, but drawing, and I don't actually have to I don't have to really teach you, you know, how to draw to be able to do this. Basically, it's this in a very, you know, kind of small way. But we're going to draw an image or a page of images. I don't know why you're laughing at me. It's always nerve-wracking when someone laughs at you when you're talking about it. Yeah, no, we're going to construct. I will kind of give you some basic things that I would like you to put in there, but we're going to construct an image that isn't just what you see in front of you, but it's a, you know, it's a combinations of things that push the image beyond what it is. Yet you're putting something representational in there, but you're just pushing the boundary. So it's just we'll do a few of them, but it's just kind of a quick way to really kind of just break those boundaries down. So again, if I'm doing a still life of what you've just got in front of you with the glasses, the phone, the keys, you would put that on your piece of paper, in the middle of the paper with the table around it. But what I'm wanting you to do is choose about 5 things. So we've got cups, you just look around you. You can have a quick squiz outside if you want to come back in. We've got masks, everything in here. I want you to choose about 5 things. And I also want you to choose a background. So your background could be the table area, it could be the wall area, or the basin. Again, you can have a quick squiz outside and see the landscape. If you really want to, we can keep the books going around. You can use a landscape that's in there, or an idea that's in there. So background with about 5 different images on it. But I want you to use texture and line making. So when I talk about that, I did, this is 5 minutes, so you can laugh now when I pull my cane. This was very quickly at home, but what I had was, I've got the beautiful Mackenzie Hills outside, and a table. So this table was right outside the window, so that was actually quite big. What I chose to do is make the table really small. I had a pot plant on the table. I only wanted to use a bit of the pot plant, and I put it over here. That pot plant probably would have been about the size of that, but I wanted to enlarge it and use it as part of the landscape. So this is just talking about using what's given there, but manipulating it to make it your own and to create your own scenario. So that's about it. Again, I had a cup, so I slanted it and I put it on, it's not on the table, it's not on anything. I think it's a little bit of a hill. Mackenzie Hills, and there's a lampshade coming out here. So that is my composition, and I've manipulated the composition. So it's not just what's given to me. I chose to make things bigger and smaller. I chose where I wanted to put it in the page. And as you can see, I filled out the whole page with my composition, which is a difficult thing for anyone starting drawing, painting, anything, is to fill out the whole page. Again, when I was in high school doing art, you'd kind of do your little sketch and then you'd have all this paper around you because So if you do struggle with that, a good way to do it is to go, well, you've chosen your 5 items, just circle it. I want 1 here, 1 here, 1 here, 1. So you've already filled out the areas that you're going to draw in, and that's the whole page. So you've just kind of blocked in those areas of where you're going to put those things. So when I talk about the composition, I want you to choose those things and choose the sizing based on where you're wanting it, what you're wanting it to look like. If you're wanting, unfortunately, we don't have plants in here, so if you're wanting a lot of foliage, you might have to quickly pop outside and take a snapshot on your phone or something. But if you're wanting all the masks in there, but they're all the same size, but maybe I want the giraffe one to be teeny tiny here, and I want that gold line or whatever it is to be sit up here. So there's no right and wrong, and there's no good and bad in this. So please just take all that off you. The other thing is the tone and texture. I'm going to put those two together. So with that book, I'll show you an image. There's a good image there of that. So again, what I quickly did was, when we talk about your traditional background and foreground, what's closer and what's further away would normally be quite light and faint, because it's almost that's just how your eyes kind of operate. Whatever's closer would be darker. Again, in art, there's no rules. You get to make that up. The lampshade was probably one of the biggest, that in the plant, that was about one of the other biggest things. But I chose to paint that really light, and draw that light, and just letting it, I didn't put any tonal work in there, it's just a line. Whereas the plant, I mucked around and made it darker and put some texture in it. So all you're doing is, you're manipulating what stands out and what doesn't. So you've got size, and then you've got tone and texture. Again, the cup is heavy. I probably would have redone that and done that light because it's over. But it doesn't matter, you can tell yourself those things, So again, that was just a very quick example. So I'm going to pass around some paper and I'll find an image in that. You can be a little bit imaginative, it doesn't just have to be, What's outside the window, this is the thing when I'm talking about the foreground and background. What he's got outside is the darkest. It's the thing that's got the most work in it, drawing and tonal work. And even texture. So that's quite funny because whatever is in the background would normally be faint, but he's like, no, I want that, to all come through. So you can see that stands right out, and everything that's in the foreground is very light.
and he's just got one big, shape, whether that's canvas or board or whatever. The figures some of them are smaller, some of them are bigger. So he's manipulating size, he's using line and empty space, and he's using some texture and heavy mark making and dark, tonal contrasts to manipulate that whole scene. And it's quite interesting. So I'll put this in the middle of the table. That one's quite cool too. It's a little bit more emptier. That gives you a good idea of, how you can kind of play around with it. So let me know if you're struggling with items or